March 31, 2022. A video link crackles to life in Australia's Parliament House. On screen, President Volodymyr Zelensky, broadcast live from a bunker beneath Kyiv. The Russian army is 40 kilometers from the capital. Ukrainian defenders are holding, but barely, and Zelensky is about to ask Australia for help, not for jets, not for missiles, for a truck. He names it specifically, the Bushmaster. He tells Australian lawmakers that these vehicles could significantly help Ukraine and would do more for common security than sitting covered with dust. Within 8 days, 20 of them were on Royal Australian Air Force transport planes headed to a war zone. Within 18 months, Australia had gifted 120 more and ordered 78 replacements for its own military. A vehicle that procurement officials had nearly cancelled 3 times in the late 1990s was now the foundation of the fastest armored advance in modern European warfare. Ukrainian soldiers would call it a home on wheels. The question no one expected was simple. Why did the president of a nation fighting for survival ask for a truck that had been built in a small factory in rural Australia, designed 25 years earlier for a war that never came? The answer is buried in July 10, 2012. A road in the Darawat district, Uruzgan province, Afghanistan. A convoy from the 3rd Battalion, Royal Australian Regiment, is moving resupply through Taliban-controlled territory when the lead vehicle, callsign Echo 21 Alpha, triggers a multi-stacked improvised explosive device buried in a 20-liter palm oil container beneath the road surface. The bomb detonates directly under the front right wheel, with the force of a commercial anti-tank mine. Private Matthew Clark is driving. He describes 2 bright white flashes. The rear door blows outward. Dust floods the compartment. When the noise stops, he looks down and sees his right foot shaking uncontrollably. He has 14 broken bones across both legs. In the seats behind him are 5 other men: Crew Commander Kurt Bevington, Sapper Rowan Robinson, Private Atu Anakina, Private Mitchell Smith, Private Daniel Snig. All 6 men are alive. 2 are seriously wounded. None are dead. By every engineering calculation, that bomb should have killed them. It did not. The vehicle that saved them was a Bushmaster protected mobility vehicle, serial number classified, built in Bendigo, Victoria. 12 years later, the crew would return to the factory floor and stand beside the robotic welding cell that had built the vehicle's hull. The workers had renamed the machine Debbie. It was named after the vehicle. To understand why a Ukrainian president would ask for this machine by name, you need to go back to 1999. A factory floor in Bendigo, Southeast Australia. A vehicle rolls off the assembly line that looks, at first glance, like an armored school bus. It is tall, it is wide, it is blunt across the nose. It weighs 15 tons. It cost the Australian government nearly twice its original estimate and arrived 3 years late. Officers who inspected it called it a battle limousine. Critics inside the defense bureaucracy noted it had been nearly cancelled 4 separate times. The original order for 370 vehicles had been cut to 299. It looked overbuilt, overpriced, and overdue. The engineers who designed it understood something the critics did not. Protection is not a feature bolted onto a vehicle. Protection is the vehicle. At the core of the Bushmaster's design is a principle borrowed from Southern African mine warfare: a V-shaped hull. The floor of the crew compartment is not flat. It is angled into a deep V running the length of the vehicle. When a mine or improvised explosive device detonates beneath the hull, the blast energy is directed outward along those angled panels, away from the floor, away from the soldiers seated above. The V-hull is not supplementary protection. It is the primary structure, welded from high-hardness steel into a single monocoque compartment. The vehicle exceeded NATO mine protection standards at level 3 before it left the factory. That protection was built into the steel itself, not added with bolt-on armor kits. The Bushmaster was designed for a war Australia feared but never fought. In 1987, Australian defense planners were worried about small raiding parties landing on the country's vast northern coastline. Operating in terrain where conventional military response would be slow, the Army needed a vehicle that could carry a 9-man infantry section across that terrain for 3 days without resupply and temperatures reaching 50 degrees Celsius. At the same time, Australian peacekeepers returning from Namibia and Cambodia were bringing back reports of southern African mine-resistant vehicles that had saved lives in exactly the kind of explosive-rich environments Australia might face. The Bushmaster was the result, a 4x4 armored carrier powered by a Caterpillar turbocharged diesel producing 300 horsepower, combat weight 15,400 kilograms, top speed governed to 100 kilometers per hour, range 800 kilometers. Every fuel line, every hydraulic tank, every flammable component was mounted outside the steel crew compartment. An automatic fire suppression system protected the interior. 3 roof escape hatches gave the crew options if the vehicle overturned. The cabin was air-conditioned at full capacity, not as luxury, but as operational necessity for soldiers who might spend hours inside in 50-degree heat. Large bulletproof windows gave occupants a clear view without exposure to fire. The vehicle weighed approximately 3 tons less than comparable American mine-resistant vehicles entering service at the same time. That margin mattered. A Bushmaster fit inside a C-130 Hercules transport aircraft. Heavier vehicles did not. A Bushmaster could operate on tracks too narrow for 24-ton vehicles. And a vehicle that could vary its route was harder to predict. In counterinsurgency warfare, unpredictability saves more lives than armor plate. The first combat test came in Iraq. 10 vehicles arrived with the Australian Al-Muthanna Task Group in May 2005. Southern Iraq was heavily mined. The IED threat was escalating. The Bushmasters absorbed impacts that destroyed lighter vehicles and kept moving. No Australian soldier died inside one. Afghanistan was the proving ground. From August 2006, Australian forces deployed to Uruzgan province with Bushmasters as the primary patrol vehicle. Uruzgan was among the most dangerous provinces in the country. The roads were seeded with explosives. The Taliban had been watching coalition vehicles long enough to know which ones they could kill and which they could not. Corporal David Nicholson was inside a Bushmaster struck by a buried device in the Mirabad Valley in 2011. The blast lifted the 15-ton vehicle onto 2 wheels. Occupants were bloodied. The vehicle was severely damaged. Every soldier survived. It was the 3rd time Nicholson had been struck by an IED inside a Bushmaster. All 3 times he walked away. Then came Echo 21 Alpha, July 10, 2012. The device that struck Private Matthew Clark's vehicle was designed to kill. A multi-stacked homemade bomb in a 20-liter palm oil container, likely initiated by a commercial anti-tank mine. It detonated directly beneath the front right wheel. Clark saw 2 white flashes, felt the rear door blow out, watched dust flood the cabin. When the vehicle stopped moving, he looked down and saw his right foot shaking, 14 broken bones. The 5 men behind him were alive. 2 seriously wounded, 0 dead. The vehicle was later recovered, repaired, and placed on permanent display in the Anzac Hall of the Australian War Memorial in Canberra. The Dutch discovered the Bushmaster's value under fire. After identifying a gap between their aging carriers and the explosive threat in Uruzgan, the Royal Netherlands Army evaluated 8 vehicles and signed a contract for 25 Bushmasters in July 2006. 5 weeks from requirement to contract, 23 vehicles were pulled directly from Australian stocks and flown to Afghanistan. The Dutch used them hard. On September 20, 2007, a Dutch Bushmaster carrying casualties was struck by small arms fire, then mortar rounds, then multiple rocket-propelled grenades. The vehicle was immobilized. Every soldier inside survived uninjured. The crew was extracted. The vehicle could not be recovered with enemy forces closing. A Dutch Apache helicopter was ordered to destroy it with missiles to prevent capture. The crew it had protected were already safe. By mid-2008, 6 Dutch Bushmasters had been destroyed by enemy action in Afghanistan. Not one Dutch soldier had died inside any of them. The Netherlands kept buying. By 2021, the Dutch fleet had grown to 116 vehicles. When Dutch forces deployed to Mali in 2014, 1 Bushmaster struck an IED near Gao and drove back to base under its own power. No casualties. Then came the call that changed everything. March 31, 2022. Volodymyr Zelensky on a video screen in Canberra, Russian forces advancing, Ukrainian defenders holding, and a president asking for a specific vehicle by name, the Bushmaster. Within 8 days, Australia committed 20. They were loaded 4 per C-17 transport and flown directly to Ukraine. More followed. By late 2023, 120 Bushmasters had been gifted. Australia replaced them with a fresh order of 78 in May 2023. Ukrainian paratroopers used them during the Kyiv counter-offensive of September 2022, the fastest ground advance of the war, retaking Izium, Kupiansk, and Lyman at over 7 kilometers per day. Ukrainian soldiers reported surviving mortar rounds detonating alongside the vehicle, Grad rocket impacts within 15 meters, anti-tank mine strikes. In each case, hull intact, crew alive. Zelensky told the Lowy Institute in October 2022 that the Bushmaster had performed masterfully in real combat operations. Ukrainian soldiers called it a home on wheels. More than 120 confirmed blast events across 4 war zones on 3 continents: Iraq, Afghanistan, Mali, Ukraine. 0 passenger or driver fatalities from inside the hull. 9 nations operate the vehicle: Australia, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, Japan, New Zealand, Indonesia, Jamaica, Fiji, Ukraine. The Bushmaster predates the category it now belongs to. The United States launched its mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle program in 2007, building roughly 10,000 vehicles as IED casualties climbed. The most common American variant, the Max Pro, weighed 17.7 tons. The British Mastiff reached 24 tons. Both offered strong blast protection. Both were largely confined to roads. A vehicle confined to roads is predictable. The Bushmaster at 15,400 kilograms could go where heavier vehicles could not. It could cross gravel tracks and dried riverbeds. It fit inside a C-130 when the Max Pro did not. It placed less stress on bridges designed for donkey carts. In counterinsurgency warfare, tactical unpredictability saves lives. Over 1,300 Bushmasters have been built at Bendigo. In April 2026, Australia announced an order for 268 next-generation vehicles at 750 million Australian dollars, with production beginning in 2027. The factory will be building Bushmasters into the 2030s. The vehicle procurement officials nearly cancelled is now the foundation of Australian ground force expansion for the next decade. On a factory floor in Bendigo in 1999, a vehicle that looked like an armored bus rolled off the line. Late, over budget, widely doubted. Critics could identify every gap in its specification. No nuclear biological chemical protection, no laser warning receivers. Its engine produced 300 horsepower for 15 tons. A modest ratio, and yet it worked. It worked when Australian soldiers drove mined roads in Iraq and came home. It worked in the Mirabad Valley when Corporal Nicholson survived his 3rd blast. It worked on July 10, 2012, when Private Matthew Clark and 5 others should have died and did not. It worked in Uruzgan when Dutch soldiers waited for helicopter extraction in a vehicle their own side had to destroy with missiles. It worked in Mali when a vehicle struck a bomb and drove itself home. It worked on the plains of Kharkiv when Ukrainian paratroopers advanced 7 kilometers a day and called it home. More than 120 blasts, 0 deaths, a robotic welding cell in Bendigo named after the vehicle that saved 6 men. On March 31, 2022, when Volodymyr Zelensky asked Australia for help, he did not ask for advanced drones or precision missiles. He asked for the Bushmaster. Because in a war where roads are mined and artillery rains from above, the vehicle that brings soldiers home alive is worth more than the one that kills the enemy. Ukraine still asks for them. Australia still builds them. The Bushmaster was overbuilt. That was always the point.